University. Additional funding is provided by the North Carolina Nursery and Landscape Association and the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, presenting TarHeelGardening.com, your online gardening resource for North Carolina plants, professional advice, and more. And by Appalachian Naturescapes, custom landscape designs specializing in Blue Ridge native landscape themes, from intimate gardens to elaborate outdoor living spaces. AppalachianNaturescapes.com. Also by the North Carolina Sod Producers Association, representing sod growers throughout the state who produce quality turf grasses to meet a variety of residential, commercial, and recreational turf grass needs. ncsod.org.
Coming up, an inside look at some spectacular home gardens. Next. Hi, welcome to In the Garden. I'm Bryce Lane. Home gardens are extremely personal and often reflect the spirit and the personality of the home gardener. On today's show, we visit two private home gardens, one in Wilmington, North Carolina, and the other near Boothbay Harbor, Maine. Each garden has a very special story to tell and some great ideas for other gardeners to try in their own home landscapes. Well, the tender of this beautiful garden is Elsie Freeman, and she and her husband Kip have this wonderful garden on Barters Island in the Boothbay area. And Elsie, this is fantastic, and thank you for having us here.
Thank you.
Could you tell us about kind of the history of this garden?
Well, this actually was bare woods when we started 35 years ago. We had purchased the property because we wanted to be up in this region as a summer place. We started out as hippies. So our first efforts really were that we had a tent platform with 2 tents up on the hill over here. We'd wander through the birch woods and the ferns to get down to our little beach. And then we decided to have kids, and became important to have a house. And we hadn't thought much about landscaping at all. It was just we had a house finally. And then my father from New York City came to visit. And it was one of those wet summers, and he walked around the house and sank in up to his hips. So we said, oh,
you need a landscape.
Need to do something. And I think so the first start really had to do with, having a retaining area, retaining walls, and getting a flat space in front. And now, so this was really the first garden. And then we kind of enjoyed that. Actually, that took a while because the critters ate all the perennials the first couple of times, or I picked things that looked really great but wouldn't survive. Then, of course, we were out and looking, and I said, oh, gee, look at that great view, ick, because all the tree stumps were there. And so we had a backhoe come in, and coming right around the house, and took out all the stumps, and brought in a bunch of dirt because the whole thing sloped away. And that was the first time we trashed the lawn. And then every time we've added a little something, we've trashed the lawn again. So we've trashed it 3 times, and to add these other gardens. And then now we're done.
You're done?
Now we're done.
Right.
Now
Famous
we're done.
last words. I know. Now, how long have you been gardening in this spot?
We have been here for 35 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So take us on a virtual walk through the garden. You've got some spaces around your house that are quite nice, and what specific areas do you have as you go through?
Well, I think the very first garden was this perennial border on this end, which was all pastels, and then we said, oh gee, it ended right there. It looked a little funny, so then we added the second garden. We had a really wet spot down there, which was the overflow for our well, so we said, oh well, why? I think I had read something about in Japan, a garden wasn't complete until it had a pond. That was the eye of the garden. And my daughter said, great, we need a little pond. And I said, we have a lot of water out here. But she was right, so we made that into a pond, with a liner and everything like that. Then we sort of pushed our way in that direction. I've been to Japan several times, wanted a Japanese garden. One of the problems with being a garden tourist is you come home and you say, I need one of those.
Right, right.
But the Japanese garden really fit with the space and with the topography here, as does the perennial border. I haven't been so lucky with some of my other ideas, like, you know, from Tuscany, I wanted to have the tall, didn't work.
Right. Sure.
And then we went to southern Spain, and I wanted the Moorish garden with the, no.
So you take what
I
this
take
land gives you,
what,
right?
what works
Right.
here, and so I don't think we have too many other.
Now, well into the woods, you've got kind of a unique garden there. Is that?
And then what we did was we actually have often had garden tours here to benefit the Botanic Garden, and we had one of these, and we were at the Japanese garden, and one of the attendees went up. Oh, he was very, didn't want to sit. Went up and over the edge and said, it's really fabulous from up here. You really should have a path up here. So that was our stroll
That's the
garden.
stroll garden.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, modeled, but only went in after we'd been to Japan, and you really get to see the stroll gardens there.
Right. So it's really a labor of love over many years.
Over many years.
Right. Right. Well, it is lovely, and we really look forward to looking around a little bit more carefully. Thanks so much for telling us about how this came about, and I know it's not done yet, even though you say it's done. I know it's never finished, and appreciate your hospitality.
Thank you so much for coming.
I'm walking through the stroll garden, which is located not far from the perennial border or the Japanese garden. But this is just a beautiful, beautiful spot. And the lesson to learn about this garden is sometimes you can't make a garden, you have to let it unfold in the natural landscape that you have around your home. This is a beautiful forest that looks out over the water. There's spruce and fir, and look at the ground. It's got years and years of litter coming from the needles that have piled up this rich organic matter in a dappled shade and sun. And you can see moss growing, and it's just wonderful. Rock outcroppings coming out where trees have died and still lay there. And look, there's fern over here growing up from the rock with lichens and mosses. And Elsie tells me that someone that was visiting her garden just happened to stray into the woods above the Japanese garden and came across this beautiful natural area. So she and her husband came in and with leaf blowers, and they moved litter away, moved some rocks to create steps, and strategically placed some little bamboo hoops and little markers to help you see where the path is. This is just a fabulous garden, and as you walk through, it's peaceful. You can hear the wind blowing through the trees, but I especially like how soft it is under my feet with the moss. So the take-home lesson is sometimes we need to look around our own yards and our properties to see what nature might actually have for us right there that's a garden in and of itself. I'm particularly impressed with this, and I'm going to go take a look through the rest of this garden. Well, this is Karen Root, and she and her husband Chuck have a beautiful garden here in Wilmington, North Carolina. Karen, how big is this garden, and how long have you been working on it?
The garden is just under 2 acres, and I've been working on it for 14 years.
Wow.
There was nothing here when we started, and everything is kind of a dream of mine to bring in. And in fact, most of the plant material came home in the back of my SUV.
Okay, now stop right there. There's some pretty good sized trees on this property, so there's a real good lesson to learn here. You brought most everything in yourself, and you planted it small, right?
I did. I planted it small for 2 reasons. One, the soil was really heavy clay, and I was having trouble digging holes. In fact, all my first holes were with a pickaxe.
Wow.
And I've gotten composted every single year trying to increase the quality of the soil. But I wanted to give the plants the best opportunity they had, and it also allowed me to move things around and handle everything myself. I had no idea everything was going to grow this fast.
Well, it's amazing. It really is. All right, well, talk to us about the garden itself. You've got some really unique and interesting spaces that you've created both with plants and with rock. You really are using rock in a very neat way here.
Well, the rock started because all of the back garden is on a slope. And after I started planting it, of course, the plants were small. Every time it would rain, we get sideways rains up here. They just like upside down, somebody turns a bucket.
Right.
So everything on the hill was sliding down the hill. And I looked at my husband and I said, I could either keep breaking everything up or we can bring some rock in. I've got to maintain the hillside. So that started some of the first big boulders in Landfall and in Wilmington were here just to help me maintain the slopes.
Right.
And I think they've also given me a great kind of an architectural differentiation, and it's been able to make the plants showcase a lot better.
Oh yeah, your design is great with the terracing that you've done and the paths. All right, let's talk about water, because you've got a lot of water. I know you've got this wonderful lake right there at the bottom, but you've incorporated fountains and streams. Talk about those a little bit.
I love the sound of water, and in some cases, for instance with my stream garden, that was an opportunity. I had to have a dry stream bed because I needed to have some place to focus all the water to get it off the property. Right. And I decided to drop a pump in the lake and pump it up the hill, and I love that feature. I can turn it off, I can turn it on, and then as I've had the opportunity, I've added a lot more water features because it just is so restful and so wonderful to sit and hear the water.
Oh, it's fantastic too, because it connects the garden. You go from one area where there's water to another, and it's lovely. All right, so you're a big old plant geek. I know that. I've been through your garden once already. It was in February, and I was impressed with your selection. Talk to gardeners out there. Tell us, not to be afraid to try things. I mean, you've obviously tried lots of different plants.
I think one of the goals that I had in this garden was not to have just what everybody else had. Mm-hmm. I wanted to break the envelope on both sides of my zone. So I wanted things that were tropical, and I wanted a lot of the conifers that most people don't grow down here. So I've tried just about anything. My idea is that I want to have the textural contrast when I'm looking at the planting beds, so I'll try it. And some winters are great, some winters are not great, but you kind of hone it down. Everybody has microclimates in their garden, and I think I have a very wide palette of plants that I just love.
So what would be your advice to a novice gardener who wants to create space like this?
I think my advice is never be afraid to try something. You never know whether it'll work, and even if it just works for one season, but it gives you the look and the feel that you want, then go ahead and try it. And of course, if you're gardening small, do pots. You should always do something that you can manage, you can control. And you should be happy and you should feel good about what you're planting. So whether it be a pot or whether it be an entire garden, just try something that's a little bit different.
And that's spoken from a real garden hobbyist, because I know you spend a lot of time out here, don't you?
I spend a lot of time in the garden, and then people have asked me, isn't that a lot of work? And the answer is no, it's not a lot of work. If it was work, I probably couldn't do it. It's my passion, and I love every single minute. Well,
we appreciate you having us here and to experience this space and see all the different plants, and thanks for sharing those words of wisdom with us.
Thank you, Bryce. I love having you in my garden.
I love visiting other people's gardens because it inspires me with new ideas. Here in Karen's garden, she's practicing a little bit of a twist on something that we call mass planting. Now, when you do a mass planting, that means that you plant the same species or cultivar of plant in a mass area, and it really gives a good color statement. Take this salvia here, planted in a mass planting. That's the classic idea. Well, here's something that I'm going to call double massing. It's when you take two plants and you combine them. You intermittently plant them together, and it creates a mass, but it's two different textures or two different colors. Now here's a great example in Karen's garden where Tyrinia, the cultivar Big Blue, is planted with Euphorbia Diamond Frost. Now these are two great performing annuals in the home landscape. They enjoy full sun, well-drained soil. The Tyrinia will grow about 2 feet tall maximum, and it flowers this beautiful blue flower that the bumblebees love all summer long. Of course, we all know about Euphorbia Diamond Frost, those little tiny white bracts and fine textured leaves. Look how they work together in amongst one another. Plant them after the chance of frost is gone, intermittently in the bed, and then let them grow together. A little bit of pruning and a little bit of fertilizing, and you've got a double massing for the whole summer long. Well, here's another great example of double massing that I found in Karen's garden. But in this case, she's using a woody plant with an annual. Now, of course, this annual is that classic Angelonia, a great plant with lots of different color flowers. This is a purple cultivar, grows about 1.5 feet, 2 feet tall with great flowers all summer long. But look what's next to it. This is one of the new abelias, and there are a lot of different cultivars of abelia. This one's called Radiance. It's a variegated leaf with a red stem, and then if you look, you can see white flowers. Doesn't have that faded pink flower that you normally see on most of the abelias, but it's a true white. And if you look at the calyces, they're a lighter color as well. Little bit of pink in the calyx to give a nice touch. But look at the combination together. The abelias have been alternated all through the garden, and then right here in this double massing, you've got the Angelonia. You've got a little bit difference in texture, color, and height, and it really creates a nice statement in a bed of double massing. Now, the other one I saw, which was a neat combination you might think about, is the red-leafed hibiscus, Hibiscus acetosella, combined with the wasabi coleus. Put those together and you've got that nice yellow and that beautiful burgundy-colored leaf. Another great idea for a double massing. So I love coming to gardens like this to get ideas that you should think about applying in your own garden. Well, no garden would be complete without garden ornament, and you can get garden ornament from just about anywhere. Sometimes it's just something that you find, maybe on the side of the road, or perhaps even in the ocean. This past summer, when our family was on vacation, my grandson Ellis and I pulled this big piece of driftwood out of the ocean. I got all excited about bringing it home in the garden. Now, it's a piece of cedar and it's been bleached by the sun. It's got nooks and crannies and holes, and it really incorporates well into the garden. Well, speaking of the ocean, I also found this wonderful part of a weather vane, I guess, east-west, that I incorporated into the garden too. So now anytime I'm in the garden, I know exactly where the sun rises and where it sets. Well, there are lots of places you can go and purchase garden ornament as well. My wife and I found these wonderful butterfly ornaments that we can locate in lots of different places in the garden at an auction a few years ago, and they've been a real good old standby. I also received this little hen here with a globe as a gift from a friend, and I've incorporated that into the garden as well, and it really adds a nice accent. We'll also think about using containers, not only for plants, and they can be very unique and interesting. Look at this one, it's a deep, rich purple color which accents, but also containers that are decorative on the outside that you just incorporate into the garden to add to it, like you see there. Another friend gave me that one for the holidays. Well, no garden would be complete without a bird bath. Adding water to the landscape really helps pollinators as well as birds. And so here's a classic old bird bath, old-fashioned bird bath that I've chosen to use in my garden. Now, water is a great thing. Insects depend on water, birds use it to drink from. You should always consider having water in the garden. But not just any old bird bath can work. Look at this small little blue bird bath, ceramic. It's a great little spot. It adds to the landscape. Well, birds. We always want to incorporate birdhouses into our landscape so that birds have a place to nest. And sometimes you can find some unique and interesting birdhouses. Look at this one here. My wife and I found 2 birdhouses at a local garden center that are very unique and interesting. We've put them in, and every year we have birds nesting in them. Well, now if you move through my landscape and then into my neighbor Dan's landscape, you can see that he's even enhanced use of garden ornament. He's actually taken rocks and created sculptures with the rocks by piling them on top of one another. It really creates a unique and interesting presentation. Dan has also chosen to collect statuary and incorporate them in and around his garden. So these are just a few ways of how you can enhance the plants in your garden by adding garden ornament, attract wildlife, and moreover, create a beautiful home landscape. What I love about visiting other people's gardens is to get ideas for my own garden. I see the way they arrange plants and I get inspired. Not only that, but sometimes I'll see a plant that I don't have and that I'm really interested in, and I think about that's one I need to have in my garden. And sometimes the people I'm visiting will be so kind they'll give me a cutting or a division of that plant. Well, recently a good friend and colleague of mine was visiting my garden and came across this plant. This is agave spot. Now here's a hardy agave for central North Carolina. And if you look at the leaves, you can see out of that rosette, each leaf looks like it has dots put on it. Well, that's where it gets the name spot, these red markings. And it grows really well in full sun. And as you can see from this planting, I planted one underground stems called rhizomes, and it pops up new plants. Well, my friend was so interested in this plant, I promised her a pup. And it's real easy this time of year to divide plants and share them. And that's one of the great things about gardening is you can share plants with other folks. So I've got my handy soil knife. I've identified a pup right over here that I'm going to dig up, put in a pot, and give to my friend. Now, dividing plants is not that difficult. I've got some Lysimachia growing here as well as a spirea, and I'm just going to move that out of the way so I can get a better view of what I'm going to dig. Take the soil knife and I come back here, push down in as far as I can go, and then try to lift, and then do it again. Ah, there, I just released the plant. Pull up. Now you want to be careful that you don't cut too many roots, and you don't want to pull too hard. Okay, there you go. Now this is a real hardy plant and easy to transplant. You can see a few roots coming. There's another root, and that's where I cut that underground root that was coming. These are adventitious roots coming from this underground stem. So there's the plant. I've got a nice clay pot here with soil already in it. I'll pull some soil out with my hand, lay it down in there. You don't want to plant it too deep, about the same depth as it was in the ground. Got some extra soil. We'll just lay that around here like so. Now, I don't want to damage the roots, but I also want to provide a little bit of support. So I'm going to push a little bit down on that soil, compress it a little bit. You don't want to compress it too much, and then add some more soil on the top. One of the leaves has been damaged. A couple of the leaves have been damaged, and that's okay. Just pull those leaves off. There. I've got it all potted up. A little bit crooked in the pot, but that's okay. We'll take this, water it a few times to get the water saturated. I'll bring this to my friend, and she'll be able to put it in her garden and enjoy it just as much as I do mine. Our plant of the week is a great herbaceous perennial vine. Now remember to send in your suggestions for a plant of the week to our website or our Facebook page, and if we use it on the air, we'll send you an In the Garden t-shirt. Now the plant of the week is Passiflora cultivar incense, the passion flower, the incense passion flower. Now this vine is a hybrid vine, a cross between Passiflora incarnata and Passiflora cincinata. Now here's a vine that has a trifoliate leaf. It's very, very lobed in 3 lobes, and it's a vine that grows all over things. You need an arbor, a fence. Here you can see it growing on a fence, and it'll just grow. It's what we call a very enthusiastic vine. Well, here's why. In the summertime, you get these flowers that really pose as a conversation piece. Look at this deep, rich lavender color, and all the parts of the flower are exposed, a little bit of a frilly edge to it as well, and they show up all over this vine. And it's a wonderful, wonderful color and enhances the garden. Now, it requires full sun, and it will spread. So one of the maintenance things you need to do with this plant is to prune it back on a regular basis. And when you prune it back, it'll continue to spread and be thick like you see here. It'll flower all summer long, well into the fall, until the first frost hits. Now it is a perennial vine, which means that it'll die back to the ground. But don't worry, even as far north as zone 6, this vine will come back and you'll get these wonderful flowers. It's great for a fence, an arbor, a trellis, even to run along the ground as a ground cover if you have a wide open area. Mix it with yellow flowering plants and you've got a great lavender yellow combination. It's a wonderful plant of the week, Passiflora incense, the incense passion flower. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. So until next time, I'll be looking for you in the garden.
To register for In the Garden, the course, call NC State's Distance Education Program at 1-866-GO-STATE. That's 1-866-467-8283. Or log on to distance.ncsu.edu. For more information about the program or to suggest a plant of the week, go to unctv.org/inthegarden.
Funding for In the Garden is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC TV, and by North Carolina State University. Additional funding is provided by the North Carolina Nursery and Landscape Association and the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, presenting TarHeelGardening.com, your online gardening resource for North Carolina plants, professional advice, and more. And by Appalachian Naturescapes, custom landscape designs specializing in Blue Ridge native landscape themes, from intimate gardens to elaborate outdoor living spaces. AppalachianNaturescapes.com. Also by the North Carolina Sod Producers Association, representing sod growers throughout the state who produce quality turf grasses to meet a variety of residential, commercial, and recreational turf grass needs. ncsod.org.